I remembered tonight.
Good job.
And with that, we'll get started here. I'll make a quick introduction of our tire tonight, and then she can have the floor. It's all hers. So tonight we got Britt Davenport with us. She is a fly tire fly fisherman, and she's fairly new to the sport, actually, compared to a lot of us old farmers.
I'll give you that.
Oh, anyway, Britt started fly fishing in 2012. And then shortly thereafter, she started tying her own flies. The reason? Her husband Brian told her she was losing way too many flies for him. He couldn't keep up, so she had better learn to tie her own. Jokingly, of course, she wrote. Little do you know where it would end up. Britt enjoys fishing for cutthroat trout in their Idaho mountains, as that is where she cut her teeth fly fishing. Naturally, her first foray into tying flies was focused on trout flies. As time went on, she also expanded into other styles of flies. Most recently, she went down the rabbit hole of full-dressed Atlantic salmon flies. God help you, girl. She has yet to surface and likely never will. She really enjoys pushing herself out of her comfort zone when it comes to fly tying, and she encourages others to do as well. Britt has been an ambassador for Norvise since 2019 as a demo tire and running the Norvise booth that shows in the Pacific Northwest. Most recently, Britt joined on as a proud member of the Semperfly Pro team. So, and with that, don't you have your own little shop as well, or fly tying?
It's not really a shop. We just tie flies for people. So
Okay. So
we were doing lessons for a while, but mostly now it's just tying flies for people.
okay. Well, with that, young lady, I will turn the floor over to you, and I'll go ahead and spotlight you and go for it.
Okay, so first off, it's been a bit since I've been in front of the Zoom camera on this end of it. Normally I work as a court clerk, so I'm on the administrative side of Zoom, not in front of the camera. So my program tonight is about CDC. I'm going to preface that by saying I am in no way an expert about CDC. There are plenty of people that know more about it than I do. I was approached to do a program, and I thought, you know, that is something I can do, and it's something I enjoy. And here in the States, it doesn't seem like it's used as much as it is overseas, in Europe. And so I thought it would be a neat opportunity to share just some different techniques on how to use it and work it into some of the flies that you already maybe fish, or some flies that you don't already fish. Um, like Rick said, we fish Central Idaho for cutthroat quite a bit. So I mean, they're pretty willing to eat just about anything given the right presentation. So they're not terribly picky, but CDC has been something I've been using more and more now. At first I tried it early on, and I really didn't like it. Come to find out, it was because I had crap material. Like anything in tying, you need to have good materials. If you don't have good materials, it's just not going to turn out like you want it to. A lot of the stuff you find just, you know, at the run-of-the-mill shop, you get 10 feathers in a bag, and they're not very good. So once you seek out some better material, then you start using it and you realize that you actually like it. So like anything, I think it's Gordon Vanderspay. He says you can't bake a cake with shit. So that's exactly it. I mean, if you don't have good material, it's not going to turn out good at the end. So with that, let's get started. The very first fly I'm going to tie tonight. And tonight I tried to pick flies that showed the different techniques of how to use CDC, which I also call duck butt. because CDC is, the feathers are on the preen gland on ducks and other waterfowl. So I just call it duck butt. It's a little easier and fun to say. When it comes to sourcing it, a lot of the stuff stateside isn't great. I found that some of the Swiss CDC brand, if you get the select, is much better. The stuff in Europe seems to be much better than what we get stateside. One of the main places I'm hoping to order some from soon is Cook's Hill over in the UK. He's got a lot of great materials, but he also, from what I've heard, he's got quite good CDC. So I'll be hopefully ordering some of that soon, as I'm running pretty low on anything with any quality. Let's see. Just kind of to run down some info on CDC. They can source it from domestic or wild ducks. The wild is typically kind of variations of gray, so I think dun colors. Domestics produce white, which is easier to dye, but they often harvest it at an earlier age, so it's less developed, so you're not going to get those nice big fibers. A lot of us tend to think with CDC, the real floatability and buoyancy with it is the oils on it, which those do help, certainly, with the buoyancy of it, but it's also how the feather is constructed, which is also what helps with the buoyancy of it. So when they dye it, oftentimes that dyeing process takes those oils away. Good manufacturers will actually go back in and add that back in. They're made of keratin, so they don't actually soak the oil up. It just coats the feathers. But that's where that feather structure actually helps with that floatability, not just the oil, which is what most people think. When you're looking through a bag of CDC feathers, you'll say you go to the fly shop and you just get a bulk bag of them. You'll find all sorts of varieties, just like any feathers we use. Some of them will be nice and long, some of them will be quite short, some of them will have longer fibers off the rachis, some of them will have shorter fibers off the rachis. So as you start working with it more, you learn what you want for each specific type of fly. Some applications you need those longer fibers, some you don't. So generally when I get a bag of CDC, I'll go through and sort it by size. So the large, medium, small, and then it's easy for me to find what I'm looking for. Again, it seems to be very popular across the pond, over in Europe, those places, but some people here in the States use it, but it seems like it's not used as much. So I guess I thought it was just a neat opportunity to share some of the techniques I use on the flies I tie. And again, I'm no expert by any means. There are experts out there. There's books all about it. Some of the books that I would suggest reading if you do want to learn more about it is Leon Link's best-selling book. It's called Tying Flies with CDC. And then there's also Mark Petitjean, and I have no idea if I'm saying that correctly, his book called Petitjean CDC. That's pretty much the Bible of CDC from what I've seen. It's a great book. So if you have an opportunity to get that and have any interest in tying more with CDC, I would encourage it.
Not to be picky, but it's Petitjean.
Petitjean, perfect. Nope.
French Swiss.
That is perfect. I've been trying to. Last night I was trying to find videos on YouTube where he introduced himself so I could figure out how to say it. So that is perfect. And like that, if anybody has comments or questions, feel free to chime in. It's nice if it's a two-way conversation as opposed to me just sitting here tying. you know, or again, if you know other, what was the UK CDC source? So I'm looking at a comment. Yes, Cookshill, Steve Cooper. Yep, he's got great materials in general. And then from what I hear, I haven't used it, but great CDC. But yeah, feel free to jump in if you have a question, comment. I'm not an expert on it. I just know the techniques I use, and I wanted to share them with you all tonight. So the very first fly we're going to do is, it's called the F fly. It's probably the most basic fly you can find. Let me switch my camera real quick. So this is the F fly. It was, again, I'll probably butcher the name. If I had a superpower, it would be butchering names. So it's Marjan Fratnik, created the F fly, and that was in the late 1980s from what I could find. CDC started kind of back in the 20s along the French-Swiss border. And then in the late 80s, when he came out with this F fly, it kind of renewed interest in it in Europe. And can everybody see that okay? Is it clear enough?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So to start with, we're just going to start with, it's just an Arex dry fly traditional. For thread, I am using, it's Semperfli Classic Wax, just a dot in watery olive color. It's probably one of my favorite colors that they have. So we're going to start by dressing our hook shank. And then what I have done, and let me cut back out real quick, just for a moment. Not stop the video. Switch out. So I've kind of made a little board with the different feathers I'll be using tonight. So you can see where some are longer, some are going to be shorter. Oh, I'm backwards. And then even some, like here we've got CDC puffs, which are just small undeveloped feathers. So those are also very useful for things, but just different things. They're not going to be useful for every fly you tie. Switch back to that fly camera. Okay, so we've got our hook dressed. So for this fly, we're going to use an actual CDC feather wrapped for the body, and you can use other materials for the body, but I thought this would be a good opportunity. So I've got a pretty long CDC feather here. The problem with CDC is it tends to be, as the feather gets bigger, the stem gets thicker and longer. So always try to find the thinnest stems you can. I mean, that's true in most fly tying. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pull those fibers down, and we're just going to tie that in right at the back. I'm going to throw just a half hitch in there because I'm going to take my thread over to my thread post. So I'm using a Norvise, so I'll use some of the rotary features, which would be similar on other rotary vices. I probably won't be doing too much spinning tonight, but we'll be using the rotary feature. If you don't have a rotary vise, then you can just simply do the hand over hand option. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this feather. You can use your Hackle pliers if you'd like. And we're just going to twist that. And so this is going to be the body on the fly. Be somewhat careful with it. I mean, they're delicate, but they're not crazy delicate. Because we've got that quite thick stem in there. Then we'll just go ahead and we'll tie that off. And you can just trim that excess away. So a lot of people tend to want to trim out all these little feelers, I guess I'll call them. don't, it just adds movement to your fly. So there's no need to trim those out. Unless you absolutely want to, if you're just super OCD about it. So for the wing on it, we're just going to be using these smaller dark dun CDC. And so to use these, we'll just be stacking them one on top of each other. And then we'll just be using the tips of them as the wing. So all three gathered up. I'm going to try to align those tips as best I can. And then pull, you'll want to kind of pull those fibers down. That way you're getting as many of those as you can. Take your measurements. You want to extend just back to the rear of the hook or a little bit beyond that. And now you're aiming to have those landing flat. So you want to do a pinch wrap. Sometimes they'll want to twist on you a bit. When that happens, just try to correct them. And then you can just do a couple securing wraps. And honestly, this is the most basic fly out there. I mean, you can't get any more basic than this, but it can be extremely productive. And just put a little head on it. And then find my whip finisher, which, I did not forget. I usually forget my whip finisher when I'm over at this table. So we're just putting a head on that. And so that's all there is to that. Like I said, it's the most basic fly. You can tie it in any colors, any sizes that would match your flies on your river. Let's see, chat. Sorry, I'm checking the chat right now. So thank you for posting that link. Perfect. All right, so next up, we're going to do, I mean, we've all fished the out-care caddis. It's a typical pattern, especially out here in the West. So today we're going to, for our second fly, tie the elk hair caddis, utilizing that CDC for the body, but then adding on the elk hair caddis wing. I first saw this pattern, I believe it was from Charlie Craven. I don't know if he originated it, but that's where I first saw it at. It's a pretty generic pattern, so I couldn't find too much more about it. I'm sure other people have done it in the past. So again, we're just using that same hook as we did on the other one, just a standard dry fly. I'm going to be using a lot of the same thread colors for this demonstration, just because we're focusing more on techniques than actual types of bugs. You can alter these, pretty much any of them, to suit your local rivers. So for ease of demo, I'm just going to be using a lot of the same colors. We're going to dress our hook shank. I just bumped the camera. There we go. So now again, for this, we're going to be using another of those longer CDC fibers. On this one, we're going to use these longer fibers here at the back as a bit of a collar. So when I picked this feather out, I made sure that it had adequate length fibers in the back here, so that it would be more of a collar, almost like a soft hackle. CDC and elk developed by Hans Weil and Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Again, pipe in there if you know things. Again, I am no expert on any of this. So again, we're just going to kind of gather those fibers. We're going to tie that in for the body. Now I want to make sure we leave enough room for our elk hair head. And so I've only gathered the bottom section. We're going to leave that top section nice and long because that's what's going to provide that kind of wispy collar around. We'll twist that a bit. And then as you get to those, you can kind of draw those to the rear. As you go. And it just helps those fibers pointing to the back. Go ahead and take a couple securing wraps and just trim that waist out. Now the other thing when we're trimming this waist out, well, this will be in a fly later on, but see, we've got a lot of fibers still on that. Don't throw them out. CDC is plenty expensive. It's not exactly the cheapest material. So you can cut those off and put them in, I use like a old pill container or whatever, and use that for dubbing. So don't throw those scraps out, certainly reuse them. Also, the nice thing about CDC is if there is one or two fibers that you find is just a bit too long, you can just pluck it out. For the hair on this one, we're just using some Nature Spirit. It's just stimulator deer hair. So just any deer hair that you might use on a regular elk hair caddis. I really stopped fishing elk hair caddis quite a bit on our local rivers just because they were fished so heavily. It just they've seen them all. And so I did start fishing this a little bit more. And so right now I've just cut a little bit of deer hair out and just cleaning that out. So I've started fishing actually a lot more of these as opposed to just your standard deer hair caddis. So I've gone ahead and stacked those. So just take a measurement. So again, you want them just slightly behind the bend of the hook. Neil says Renee Harrop's book Learning from the Water is as good as any. Yes, it is. That is also there's Renee also has some really good articles in various magazines. If you just do a quick Google search on him about using CDC and incorporating it into the flies that we typically use out west here. So that's one of the resources I've used in trying to learn how to incorporate it into the flies I use here in Idaho. So we're just going to take a measurement of that. And just trim those buttons out. And so we're just going to tie it just like we would any other. Hopefully you can't hear my dog barking in the background. He's out on the back porch, I think. So we're just going to tie that like we would any other elk hair caddis. Take that thread kind of up through those butt sections. And we're just going to finish that off right at the eye. Yeah, if you ever get a chance to go to Renee's shop, Trout Hunter down in Island Park, he's just got a bin of just amazing flies usually that has been tied by him. And they're just amazing CDC flies. We usually try to get down to the railroad ranch at least once a year to fish, and a lot of our CDC flies go with us on that trip. They're perfect. They land delicately and are just a primo spot to use CDC, which is partly why Renee probably uses it there.
Say, Britt.
Yeah.
Bill asked the question, can ostrich herl serve as a crude substitute for the tail on this?
The tail on it.
It'd be the
There's-
first fly.
Well, the first fly. Oh,
Neither of them have had tails, so I guess I'm not quite sure how to answer that.
You're right. They don't have tails, Britt.
yeah.
Certainly could if you want to. It's your fly. You can do whatever you like with it. You know, you may be on to the next great thing. But no, neither of these have had tails. I mean, if you were to use ostrich, I mean, there's a whole, another discussion about ostrich herl and emu feathers that could be had in flies. I don't know that the feather structure is such that it is as buoyant. I don't believe it is. And it certainly doesn't have the oil that helps it float. So, I mean, that would just be things to consider if you did try to substitute that from actual CDC. But, try it. You never know. I'm pretty sure at some point all of these flies were brand new and nobody had ever tried them. So. All right. So the next fly, and this, I kind of have to laugh at this one. Oops, excuse me. My thing just fell over. So this next fly it's called the Duck's Dun by Charles Jardine. I have to laugh because, gosh, probably 10 years ago now, we had the North Idaho Fly Fishing Festival. Expo, sorry, not festival, expo. And I coordinated tires for that for a lot of years. And our star for the show was Charles Jardine, and they put on a class that he taught about fly tying. And I have this amazing book from him with all of these amazingly delicate flies for fishing over in the UK and Wales for brown trout and grayling. And I kid you not, the first fly he ever taught me to tie was a squirmy wormy. So I just have to laugh at this. So Charles taught me to tie a squirmy wormy back in the day. I think it was when squirmy wormies were just coming out. So this fly, it's intended to represent an adult mayfly. So for this, we're going to actually use the CDC. Rather than using it as the body, we'll use it as a wing. And we've actually put two feathers back to back, so they're kind of splayed out. This is where a good use of your smaller feathers would come into play. You don't need those massive ones so much. If I can get a hook out of the box. Again, we're just using a standard dry fly hook. Same color thread because we're keeping it simple. So just that watery olive. So I'm cleaning up my workspace. So we're just going to dress our hook shank. So for the tail, this pattern actually calls for 4 to 5 saddle cape fibers of a jungle cock, which if you're a salmon fly tyer, you probably have those, or if you tie steelhead flies. If not, you can just use, it also says grizzly hen fibers. So in light of the fact that I didn't dig out any of my jungle cock capes, I'm just going to use 10 saddle fibers. So we're just gonna take a measurement. You want them to be about the length of the hook. And we'll just tie those down. If you want, you can trim those butt ends out. We're going to be dubbing the body, so you don't have to worry as much about having a smooth body as you would if you're doing a floss body or anything like that. That's the salmon fly tire coming out, where I've just become completely anal about trying to make smooth bodies. So for the dubbing, you can use natural dubbing if you want it to be spikier, or I'm just going to use some superfine in just a kind of a sage color. So it's, to me, it says sage, but to me it's more of just a light olive, because we'll make that thorax a little bit darker. So just get that dubbed on. Take that to the rear, and then we'll just take turning wraps to the front. Okay, so we've got our body. Next is going to be our wing, and then also our hackle. So for our wing, again, we're just using, see if I can, probably won't focus and it's too light, but we're just using 2 small feathers here. Don't use your nice big crazy flowy ones on this. This is a great option to use your smaller feathers. And so each feather kind of curves outward, and so we're going to use that to our benefit. So you want to put those feathers back to back and utilize that curve. Try to line those tips up as best you can. And then again, we're going to just do a pinch wrap to bind those down. Try to keep them right on the top of your hook shank. And so those feathers should be going like that, kind of away from each other. We'll just trim those buttons, bind those down. Now for the hackle, I'm just using some done dry fly hackle. Again, all of these patterns can be tied in whatever colors or sizes you want, just specific to where you fish. So I'm just kind of going with an olive theme today because it's just easy, and honestly, we fish a lot of olive flies. So we're going to tie in our hackle on the side closest to us. And for the thorax, we're just going to use a little bit darker dubbing, so I'm going to switch to just the olive color. What are the advantages of using CDC as body versus dubbing or chenille? In my opinion, it's just that it has more floatability. It also has little fibers that stick out more so, as long as you don't trim them out. So that way it adds more movement to your fly. John writes, there's a neat dubbing box. Where can I get one? Semperfly sells them empty, I believe, and then you just stuff the dubbing in it. So it's really nice and handy for traveling. Bags are nice, but like we go camping a lot, so we'll take a variety of dubbings, and so it's a lot easier just to take it in something like this, and we can just, you know, take a few of these and be covered for all sorts of different scenarios. So we're just gonna go ahead and dub that thorax. And so, especially with the rotary vise, you want to use half hitches quite a bit. Anytime you go over to your thread post, if you put a half hitch in, as you spin or turn your vise, it'll keep that thread from building up wraps. And then also, if you were to break your thread, because nobody ever breaks their thread, it'll theoretically not unwrap beyond that. That's not always the case, but generally it'll kind of hold the place there, especially if you're using wax thread of some kind. So for the hackle, I'm going to take that first wrap and I'm going to pull these feathers up. We're actually going to go behind one full wrap. And so that'll help prop those feathers up more like mayfly wings. And once I've done that, I can use my rotary function. Or if not, you can go hand over hand if you don't have a rotary vise. Either way is just fine. I always say there's lots of great vices out there, and the main thing is as long as they hold a hook, you've got it. If your hook slips, then you've got a serious problem, and it's going to be very frustrating. So we're just going to tie that off. And then we can just go ahead and throw a half whip finish in there. Sorry, it's been a really long day at work. I rushed right home from work to get on here. So the fun part of this fly is actually Charles trims the bottom and burns it. So I thought, oh, should I use the lighter? And then I got to thinking, no, we're going to use the cautery tool. Lighters and I tend to catch flies on fire. So if you have a cautery tool, this works wonderful. When I was at the Oregon Fly Fishing Expo this last year, a couple months ago, a lot of people were talking about with these, you can buy them at fly shops for, a good amount of money. Or I guess they use these in surgeries at like veterinary clinics. And so it's worth asking your vet, your local veterinary clinic, because once they use it, they have to throw it away, to see if you can just grab their ones that they've not, that they've used once and don't need anymore. So just a thought. So we're just gonna heat that up. We're just gonna singe those fibers on the bottom while trying not to light our fly on fire, which doesn't always work. So that is The Ducks Done by Charles Jardine. Again, I just laugh when I see it because it's such a, he ties such delicate, dainty flies, but the very first memory I have of him was when he came over to our club show and taught me how to tie a squirmy wormy. So that was before I knew Charles was, a big deal. So I just thought he was some guy from the UK that, wandered over. All right. Any questions on that one? Let me check the comments real quick and see if I missed anything.
We have a question from John Britt. What are the advantages of using CDC as body versus dubbing or chenille?
Oh yes, I've answered that already. But again, I would just say the floatability, and then also with the little fibers, it just adds a lot more movement. I mean, you certainly could use dubbing or chenille. I don't love chenille, I'm not gonna lie. I've never cared for chenille, so I usually would use dubbing or something else.
All right. He also thought that your dubbing box is pretty neat. Wanted to know where you got one. Got it.
Semperfly, you can get them empty and you can put your own dubbing in them. Let's see, purpose for singeing the bottom. So from what I could gather from Charles' thing is you can either trim the bottom or singe it, and it just appears as legs, that sort of thing. I don't know if it would really make a difference or not, whether you singe it or not. It's kind of fun playing with fire though, so, until you burn your fly. As far as, okay, this is a great question. After catching a fish, how do you treat the CDC? So this is the other, let me switch cameras real quick. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. So the other thing with CDC, when I first started trying it and fishing it, I got very frustrated after catching a fish with it because it would gum up. And I was still really early on in my fishing, so I just wanted to get my fly back out there as quick as I could, because I just got to get it out there because apparently I thought the fish were going somewhere. Rather than just taking the time to properly treat it and get it back out there. So what I found, you can, of course, kind of rinse the fish gunk. I don't know what the technical word would be other than fish gunk. Kind of rinse that away. If you have an Amadou dryer, use that to dry it. The other thing I found really helpful with both drying and getting the gunk off of it is it's called the Wonder Cloth by Umpqua. It's just this little piece of material, but it seems to do a really good job of getting that crap off of it, lack of a better word. And then when you're dressing it again, just make sure you're using a CDC friendly dressing. If you can use one made of preen oil, which is the oil out of the duck's butt, more power to you. That's going to probably be your best bet. I've used in the past, I've used Loon Lock Saw, which is also a really good option. It's CDC friendly. It's not as good as preen oil, but it is okay. For all things holy, don't use gink. Gink will not work. It'll just gum it up, which I have a ton of gink, and yeah, so just don't do that. It does not work. Frogs is great too. Yep, that's a good option. I see in the comments some people have said frogs fanny, so that too is a great option. I've not used it a whole lot, but I've used it a few times and it is good. But that, honestly, that Wonder Cloth from, I think it's Umpqua. I think we got it from Charlie Craven's shop, but probably any Umpqua dealer would have it. It's just a cloth, and it's great for cleaning off all the gunk and kind of drying it out so that you can treat it again. So that's what we do. And once I started just taking the 10 seconds to do that, I found my frustration level coming down quite a bit fishing them. And that's where, just out the gate, tying them and then fishing them, it was very frustrating because of A, poor materials to start with, and then B, once you did get on the water, you catch a fish and you say, great, what now? It's sinking like a rock. So it was just learning how to properly clean them up and get them to where they can fish again. And that's the best series I've found as far as that is that Wonder Cloth or Amadou, and then just treating them with some preen oil. So if anybody has any other suggestions on that, I am all ears, because yeah, all ears on that. So please, if you have suggestions, drop those down in the comments section. Let's go. So I'm gonna switch back to the fly camera.
Did you get the purpose of the singeing of the bottom of the fly?
Yes, sir. It makes, just so it looks like little legs poking through.
Okay.
You can just trim it or singe it. Either way. I don't know that one works better than the other. Charles could probably answer that better than I could. I singe it just because I like playing with the pottery tool.
You just like the fire.
Yes. Fun fact, I also almost lit our fly tying room on fire a couple of years ago because I finally opened the window for sunlight, and Brian's magnifiers were sitting on the desk, and next thing I know, there was smoke coming from the desk. So this is why I need adult supervision for most everything. Next up, so those were kind of some dry flies and different ways to use it on dry flies. Most of us think of CDC, we think dry flies, it floats, CDC. So we're going to start working our way down through the water column. So we'll be working now on some emergers type flies. So we're gonna start with just kind of a basic shuttlecock. These come in all different varieties, all sorts of stuff. You can really dress them up, but we're just gonna tie a basic one tonight. These kind of came from Hans van Klinken, which, I mean, we all know him as designing the Klink hammer, which, by the way, he just put a book out about that, and I can't wait to get a copy of it. But he created the once and away pattern, and then all of these other patterns kind of referred to as shuttlecock flies kind of spurred from that. So we're just gonna do a real basic shuttlecock fly to show how you can use these. We're actually going to use CDC puffs for these. So here we're going to use, I should have used a different background color. I'm sorry, I didn't think about that. So we're going to use these two CDC puffs. So they're just these little small kind of just underdeveloped feathers that haven't fully grown out yet. So for the hook, this time we're gonna switch it up to just a curved nymph hook. So Arex 541 or whatever curved nymph hook you like. Again, this is going to be very generic, just to show how to use the CDC. You can do this, you know, any way you'd like as far as size and color goes. So I'm just gonna mount my hook and my vise there. And then again, surprisingly, we're just gonna use some more watery olive. Make sure I've got everything. So for the body on this, we're just going to be using just thread as our body. You could use any number of materials. There's lots of holographic flash out there, all sorts of things. But for this, we're just going to use thread. And I am going to try to keep my thread base pretty flat since we're going to be wrapping a quill over that. And I say that and I, you know, buggered up on my hook point. So try to get that wrapped over. So if you spin your thread counterclockwise, most threads that will flatten it out. I think the only one that wouldn't would be the Legarton, where I believe it's spooled the other direction. So I'm just going to bring my thread back up and we're going to tie these two CDC puffs in. Is Wonder Cloth just a microfiber cloth? Sorry, I'm looking at the comments from John Wright. Oh, Beth Japay also says, I swish it in the water, then use dry shake spray. Perfect. Treating CDC feathers with Scotch guard work. I don't know. I haven't tried that. I do dip some of my other flies in silicone. I've tried that with CDC and it just kind of gummed them up. But you could certainly try it and see. You don't know until you try. But your dry shake spray works good too. And yes, as far as the Wonder Cloth, I believe it's just a microfiber type cloth. Not the type like if you go to your local Harbor Freight and get the 4-pack of microfiber cloths for $1. It's not that type of microfiber. But I do believe it's some type of microfiber. And Larry says Wayne Llewellyn has a pattern CDC spinner that he has had great success with. Wayne's article and videos are online in the Busick library on the website. Dutch maybe knows that this pattern is in the library. I will check that out because that would be certainly great to add to our arsenal of patterns, especially a spinner pattern. Thank you, Larry. So as far as, we'll get back to tying the fly instead of checking comments. We've got just those 2 CDC fibers. I've aligned the tips. I'm gonna kind of pull those fibers forward. And sometimes it helps if you just moisten your fingertips a bit. You can either use, water or spit, whatever floats your boat. And then we're just gonna tie those in out the front of the hook. So this will be the little part that holds it up while the bottom end hangs down in the water. Cut those waist ends off at an angle, so that'll help with the taper of our body. We're going to continue to flatten our thread by turning it counterclockwise as we go. Try to get those butt ends all mashed down. And then we're just kind of building in a subtle taper as we go as well. So for the body, you can either use a real quill if you'd like, or you can use just, I'm using a Simplify Perfect quill. It's just a little plastic, I guess, for lack of a better word, material. So you just kind of peel it off the sheet, turns into a little strip. I don't like starting it down here at the very bottom. It's just too small, so I'm going to cut part of that off. And then I'm just going to tie that in at the rear, and then take your wraps to the front again. And binding that all down, a bit of a lump here, so I'm going to try to fill that in. Just looking for a somewhat smooth underbody. And then if you want, you can go ahead and put that half hitch in and take our thread over to our thread post. And we'll just start wrapping this. Be careful of that hook point, whether you're using a perfect quill or a real one. We don't want to break it off. Just take a couple wraps to just bind that down. I like to go back over it a bit just to make sure it's tied in nice and tight so it doesn't slip out. So at this point, if you want, you certainly can go over it with resin. You don't have to, but you could, just to add some durability to it. So I'm just going to take a light layer of, I'm using, I believe it's Bone Dry from Solares. I'm just going to hit that real quick with the UV light. And now for the thorax, I'm just using some squirrel dubbing from a squirrel that we harvested, I should say Brian harvested back when we lived in Michigan. So he just took the shears to it, and now we have a healthy supply of dubbing for the rest of our lives. And we're just gonna dub a nice little thorax on that. So we're gonna go behind, pull that forward, and take a wrap or two in front. And that'll help prop that wing up a bit. And just put a little head on that, and then we'll just whip finish it. So again, this is just a super simple shuttlecock type fly. Just kind of nondescript, but you can do whatever you'd like as far as making it into something that looks more like what you would see on your rivers or lakes. Easy peasy, and it's a great use for those little CDC puffs. You can buy those just in their own little bag. which even in that one little bag, you do have to kind of cull them. Some are good, some are not. The next pattern we'll be doing is, it's called a porcupine, but honestly, it's just a paraloop, or also you might see it referred to as a hackle stacker. But rather than using hackle, we're going to be using CDC for it. Do I ever add a tail to that fly? You certainly could. I don't, but you could. There's a lot of different shuttlecock patterns out there, and to be honest, I don't fish shuttlecocks a whole lot. We don't do a lot. They seem to be more of a lake pattern, and we don't do a lot of lake fishing. So, you certainly could. I guess that's one of the things I love about fly tying, is that you can kind of do whatever you'd like. You see a pattern that you like and you think, oh, I think I'd like to add this to it or that to it. You can kind of play around with it and see if maybe those changes would be more successful on your local waters. That's really the one thing I've learned through tying. I've been tying since 2012. One of the best things about it is there's always more to learn, and there's always rabbit holes to go down, some better than others. I would say that for sure. But there's always more to learn. There's always more things to try. And that's what kind of keeps me going as a tyer, is just trying different things and trying to be well-rounded. I really think it's important to be a well-rounded fly tyer, not just kind of stuck in your own little specific type of fly. We all have the things we like to tie the most. Let's see. William McLaughlin says, I've done a tail with horsehair that is almost indestructible. And in the comments, Neil says, here in the colonies, our version of the shuttlecock is a smoke jumper, or better yet, a Quigley cripple. Both can be tied with CDC. Yes, the Quigley cripple is one that we fish a lot when we're down on the railroad ranch down in Island Park. We fish that quite a bit down there. It's a great pattern. It was pretty fun to tie too. I was going to do that tonight, but it didn't make the cut. So for this next fly, we're going to use it's a FW 521, which is just an emerger barbless hook. Any emerger type hooks that you prefer is adequate. Again, we're just going to be using same thread. And we're going to adjust that hook shank here into the bend of the hook. For the tail, where to go? We're going to use, for the tail on this, we're just going to use some Coq de Leon, whatever color you like. So long as it's speckled, it usually looks pretty good. And so we're just going to get that tied in. I want to keep that kind of on that top of that hook shank as best we can. And then we'll just tie that in, trim those butt sections out. Can't really see it because it's down in the vice jaws, but it is there. For the body, again, we're just going to use some of that perfect quill. You can use real quill, you can use whatever material you'd like for the body. Again, I'm going to trim this kind of back from that very end because it's so skinny at that front part. It just won't give us a lot of segmentation. that tied in. Now our body on this one again is just going to be thread. So we're just going to try to keep flattening our thread out a bit. And just cover up all of those butt sections. This is where if you want to build in a bit of a taper, this would be the time to do it. I call that good. I'm going to go ahead and we'll just put a half hitch in. So this is one pattern I've really enjoyed tying. I like hackle stackers. A guy we know is pretty much like the king of hackle stackers. And so when I saw this one on CDC, I thought, oh, I've got to do that. It looks really neat. And I just like how it's a little bit softer than if you use real hackle. Go ahead and just tie that up. Again, I like to kind of tie it down, pull it back, just to make sure it's not going to slip out of the way. So we're going to wrap back over it just a hair. If you want, at this point, this would be a great point to add resin. If you want to just make that body a little bit more durable, and just lightly coat it with whatever your preferred resin is. Hit that with your CDC, not your CDC light, goodness, your UV light. There we go. That just makes it a little more durable, but the next thing we're going to do is for the actual part that we wrap the post on, we are going to use, where did it go? So I'm just using some poly yarn. So nothing fancy, just some poly yarn. I'm using cream. And I've got a piece long enough to where I can make a loop out of it. That's just going to make our life easier when we're wrapping that CDC up the post. I'm going to match those ends up and cut them off flush. We're just going to tie those down in that thorax area. So if you see, I've got a bit of a loop up here. This is what we're going to wrap our CDC around. So in essence, this is exactly like a hackle stacker pair post. Not pair post, hackle stacker pair loop, sorry. It's exactly the same thing. We're just using CDC instead of hackle. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and make that loop, and this is what we'll put our CDC in. So I'm just going to make a little loop here. Okay, so we got that. And then for the thorax, we're just going to use some more of that squirrel dubbing, that lovely squirrel dubbing that Brian harvested for us years ago. For any of you that live back east, I dearly miss squirrel hunting. Just in Idaho, we do not seem to have the squirrels like we did back east. We have them, but they're just these little, and they look more like chipmunks than squirrels, so we don't do a whole lot of it. So I'm just gonna dub that, make sure you've kind of got a little bulbous thorax going there. I'm gonna go ahead and throw a half hitch in, so we save our spot, and I'm gonna break my thread while I do that. So I'm just gonna reattach our thread. That never happens. Go ahead and put another half hitch in and bring it over to our thread post. So for this, I'm going to switch cameras, and I wanted to share these tools that Mark Petitjean, however you say it, uses. Let me clear my work desk off a little bit, and I'll show you how to use these magic tools, which are frankly magic. both for CDC and other materials as well. There we go. So these are called the Mark's tools. We'll go with that. So they're these little clip things. And then they also have these, and there's all sorts of different tools you can use to play with CDC. It's like anything in fly tying. We're kind of gear, junkies, and so there's Stoneflow brand, there's the Mark Petitjean tools. They'll these do the same function. I mean, there's a little bit of a difference, but in essence, they're the same thing, just a tool. You can also use a bulldog clip if you haven't bought any of this fancy crap. There's also this, which is by Swiss CDC. So I'm trying to figure out what camera I'm at. I was a little hesitant to get this because it's a little spendy, I'm not gonna lie. But I love it. It's got just great tension, and then it's also got markings on it for measurements along it. And they also have a newer one out now as well that's a little bit more fine-tuned. So it's not exactly cheap, but it is by far my favorite as opposed to a bulldog clip or just that kind of clip. I shake a lot, and so the tension on it really helps me make sure I have tight control of those materials, even when I'm shaking a little bit or that sort of thing. So for the hackle on this, we're going to be using these three, if you can see them, these three longer hackles. There's three of them there. And so each of these hackles has, these are not by any means great CDC feathers. They're sparse, they're not great. But so I want to use both sides of those feathers if possible. So what these magic tools allow us to do, so it's got a spring kind of around it. So I'm going to take those three feathers and we're just going to line them up, not lose them in the process. So I've got them lined up all together, and we're just going to take them and pull them down into that magic tool. And so what it's done is it's lined up those feathers on both sides of the hackle. So now we can grab onto those with our bulldog clip. Sorry, that's really not showing up as well as I'd hoped. We're going to take our scissors and we're just going to trim those ends off. Again, if you want, you can trim the CDC fibers off of those for your dubbing. So we're left with all of those fibers on those three feathers as opposed to just one side. So that really helps you fully maximize. If you do have CDC that is maybe less than great, it helps you maximize all of that feather. So I'm just going to take my CDC clamp or bulldog clip, whatever you want to use. This is just the one I have to use, otherwise stuff goes everywhere. I'm going to clip that down, and then you just squeeze the bottom of it. And so now we're left with the CDC and all three of those stems aligned. We can go in and just trim those stems out. And so we're left with just that CDC in there. And so now we're going to go ahead and let me switch cameras out again. And the great thing about these magic tools is you can do that with any feather, not just CDC, or you can do CDC and ice dub or CDC with pheasant hackles. You can really get quite creative with it as to what you're mixing together. So it just gives you some options. I'm gonna untwist this. dubbing loop, but twist it up while we're doing other things. Hopefully. There we go. We got our dubbing loop. I'm just going to take that CDC clip that we got that dubbing in now. Or not dubbing, CDC. That was a long day at work, just throwing that out there. So we're going to put that in that dubbing loop. And we're just going to make sure we've got just a little bit kind of push through there. Don't need a whole lot on that back side, just enough to keep it in there. And then we're going to give it a spin. And we're just making a loop out of it, just like a dubbing brush, only we're making it out of CDC. I was watching a video the other day that I was kind of amazed that they actually used to make CDC on a rope. It was a really old video from the East Idaho Fly Show. I think it was Craig Matthews tying it, and it was a CDC on an actual rope. And I thought, gosh, that's genius. I don't know if it's still available. So we're going to take that loop that we created, and we're just going to start wrapping that around just like we would as if it was just a regular hackle stacker. Just instead, we're just using CDC for it. So that's the only difference. It's no different than any other hackle stacker, pair loop. We're just using CDC for it instead. So you want to make sure that distance is about the same distance from the back to the front. Once you've got that there, we're going to pull this, take it out of our twister. Sorry, mess going. There we go. Take it out of the twister. So we're going to make sure that thread is forward. So we'll tie that in. And then we're also going to pull that loop forward. So we're going to tie both of those in right behind the eye of the hook. Give it a little tug to make sure it's nice and snug. And then pull that up, and you can just put a little head on that fly. So I haven't tried this one on the river yet. I'm really excited for our trout season. Our rivers are finally thawing out, and I'm excited to try this one. I have not tried it yet, though. Well, that was a crap whip finish. But... So I am excited for this one. I think it'll be really fun to fish. You can just trim your thread out. And then go ahead and pull that post forward and trim it, but leave a little bit. It just helps as kind of a cider. If you got thread sticking out, trim that out. So right now, yeah, it's pretty wild and woolly. If you want to trim it out a little bit, just pull it up. And you can just pick those fibers out if you want it to be a little bit shorter. Nice thing about CDC is it's really easy to just pull fibers off of it and break them off. Sliding into 75, Neil, that's great. I'm sliding into 40 next year. So, and I've already got little tremors, so that's not great.
That's the reason I made the comment. You know, I've got tremors, so they impact me pretty greatly. So the idea of using that tool or tools to help was a great idea. Thank you. This is Bill.
It's helpful for me because it's just a family thing. My dad has shakes, I shake, whether I drink coffee or not, I have shakes. And so anytime I can find a tool that helps me a little bit, I'm all for it. So and that's where, you know, these are the Stonefo ones. They're good. I mean, they're fine. They do what they're intended to do. The Petty ones have I'd say a little bit more, Pettijean, sorry, a little bit more tension on them. But neither of them have near as much tension on it as the Swiss CDC clamp. So yeah, it's a little spendy, but you know, it's worth it. And then I can use it for other things too. So, and it helps me with when I'm trying to make brushes and things like that.
Trying to find a spring or a Swiss clamp is the biggest obstacle. Boy, they're
Really?
they're hard to find.
Really?
Yep. Hey, I'm curious what that dubbing tool was you had.
The spinner?
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't seen that before.
Oh, so it's a Swiss CDC thing too.
Oh,
A
okay.
little different. I wouldn't say I love it, but I like it well enough and I bought it, so I use it. It's a little different. It's got a lot of stuff going on. So you go to definitely, there's some videos out there you can watch to see how to use it in different ways. I don't use it to its full potential, that's for sure.
Britt,
Yeah.
have you ever done split thread technique instead of a dubbing loop?
Yes, we're gonna get to that.
Oh, good.
We're not there yet, but yes.
There's no need to ever do a dubbing loop after you've
Yeah,
done split thread,
very
in my
true.
humble opinion.
That is very true. Splitting thread, it's just nice because you don't get the bulk of it. So
That
there's
does
something
assume, Neil,
I
that
think.
does assume you can split the thread with enough control.
What was that?
Just great. I'm just saying, if you don't have enough control over your motor skills, splitting thread can be really difficult. I will end up looking like a pin cushion. That's what I think, and that's just my point
True.
on. I love how people split threads. I think it's an absolutely wonderful technique. But if you've got motor skill issues, it can be very difficult.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I do okay with it, but I could see where if you do have motor skill type issues, that would be even more difficult. Where using a loop with a clamp of some kind would maybe make that easier. I'll admit I'm not great at splitting thread. I got a new tool the other day, which I'm kind of excited about. I saw it on one of the UK Zooms, and I'll show it. I'm not great at it yet, but I'm really enjoying using it, and it's making splitting thread a little bit easier at least. So Dave Londre says you can find Swiss CDC tools at Flyfish Food Fly Shop. So I imagine it's just a matter of whether they have them in stock or not, but they're good. I mean, they're expensive, but they're good and they're really well made. So
Okay.
next up, it's a little difficult to split thread if you don't see very well. That is true as well. So I mean, that's the nice thing is there's different ways to do you can get this similar result with different techniques. And that's, I guess, one of the nice things is if you know different ways to do something, you can find which one works best for you and go with that. One of the cool things about time flies. So next up, we're going to do, I know, God forbid, a Euro nymph. We have started Euro nymphing a little bit and it does feel like cheating, but again, I feel like when fishing, you should be well-rounded. So Brian has been helping me with that, and it is very effective. It does feel like cheating. The flies are fun to tie though, and they're relatively easy to tie, which is a good thing because you lose a butt ton of them. So the next one we're gonna tie it's just a poison tongue variation. Gary says, I live in Florida on saltwater. Would CDC have any improvement for saltwater? Gary, I honestly don't know the answer to that because I've seen the ocean once and I sure as hell didn't fish it. We went to the Olympic Peninsula as a sightseeing tour, so I've never fished saltwater. I don't know that it would make much of a difference in that situation. I'm not familiar enough with it to have any sort of opinion on it. If anybody else is on here that has experience with that or thoughts on that, please pipe up and let Gary know. I in my mind, I don't know that it would. I just think those flies are so big, it would probably just get lost in them because most of the flies are so big. I just CDC just doesn't come that big. So anyways, if anybody knows, please pipe up and drop that in the comments or speak up. For this, we're just using a jig hook, size 14, using just a silver tungsten bead from Semper Fly. Get that put on real quick. If you get, Dave Landre says if you get the CDC tool, go for the Feather Prepper 2. Dave, what is the Feather Prepper? Can you tell us about that? I'm not familiar with that, but I haven't really looked at any of their stuff in any great detail lately. Are you there, Dave Landre? No, okay. Dave's gonna be.
It's a tool that helps you get the CDC feather prepped up to put into the clamp.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, it'll accommodate several different sizes.
Oh,
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
I'll have to look it up. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, there again, check with the Flyfish Food Shop down in Utah.
Okay, I will check with that because yeah, I mean anything to make, even if you can use those littler feathers more efficiently, all the better. This one we're switching threads finally to gray. Ta-da. So again, it's just classic wax, A-dot. Thread is just Tyre's choice. It's whatever you'd like to use. For the wire, I'm just using some blue wire. And we're gonna just start that just behind the bead. I'll just take that all the way down to the back, to the rear of the hook. And I don't have a hair clip with me. Oh, let me grab. Don't have little women's hair clips at your bench, you're missing out. They're great for holding materials down and they're super cheap at the dollar store. Or on Amazon if that's your option. Here in Lewiston, we don't have a whole heck of a lot, so unfortunately we're left to Amazon quite a bit. So I'm just gonna make a body out of that gray thread. So we're just gonna cover up that wire, build in a little bit of a taper. If you want to be super particular about flattening it out, you can, but I'm just worried about making a taper and going from there, covering that wire up. We're gonna go ahead and throw half hitch in. And then we'll just take our rib forward. Which that was probably the worst rib job I've ever seen. There we go. That's a little better. And you can just helicopter that wire off. For the thorax, I'm just going to use some blue ice dubbing. So we're just going to make a little thorax, and what that will do is that'll help prop that CDC up that we're going to put on here in just a minute. Put that thorax on there. It looks like I grabbed up some purple in there with it. That is the one thing about these containers. If you're not careful, you can grab some of the color next to it. So just pay attention to that if you use them. But sometimes it works out nicely and you get a nice purple in there. So we've got that. So now I'm just going to use, again, I'm going to use some of that kind of light dun color CDC. You can't see it real well. So on this though, I want to make sure the fibers coming off the rachis are nice and long, so there's a few things you're looking for on the feathers. You want the length total, and then the fibers coming off the rachis, and then a thin stem. So if you get the trifecta, lucky you, it's probably not going to happen. So again, we're just going to, we're going to use, let me switch cameras, wrong camera. So again, I'm just going to use that clamp. And I've got 2 feathers here. And then you just want to make sure you pull those fibers back so they're at a 90-degree angle before you put them in the clamp. Got them in the clamp. Just going to cut the ends off.
I like it.
These clamps have different sizes. They're small, medium, large, and I think there's a magnum, which, I mean, kudos to you if you CDC that can fit in a Magnum magic tool. I don't, but I'm sure Mark Pettigene does. But for those, you can use saddle hackles. You can use all sorts of different feathers in these, not just CDC. I'm gonna go ahead and just grab that with our clamp again. Pull that out. So again, we've got those stems all aligned, and we're just gonna trim those out of the way. So on a fly like this, you've got 2 options at this point. You could certainly tie a CDC feather in by the tip and just wrap it like a collar around it. But when you do that, you're going to have a massive stem, adding a ton of bulk to your pattern at that point. So the other option is we can split thread, like was mentioned earlier. So I've got this really neat little tool. Let me switch cameras again.
Please switch cameras up.
So it's just this little tool. I think I saw it on one of the UK Zooms. It's out of Germany. I can't think of the name of it, but I could go grab the card. And it's just this little tool, and it's got just this little burr on the very tip of it, to split the thread. And so pretty much, and I'm not great at this yet because it literally just came in the mail last week, so I'm still practicing with it. You kind of push and pull, and then your thread is split. So you just push, no, you pull, and then push. Jan Aben, I believe, is the one that I saw using it. And he was obviously much more proficient at it than I am. But once you get it, it's pretty quick to split your thread. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you do, it's quite, pretty easy, and you don't have to be able to necessarily see it with a fine-tooth comb. So again, benefit to me. We're just going to take that CDC. We're going to go ahead and put that in that loop. Now, looking at that, I've probably got way more than I want. So I'm just going to take some of that out, save it, add it to my dubbing collection. Then twist my bobbin. We're just going to make a loop out of that. You can't see it, but just below the camera, I'm just spinning my bobbin so that it'll spin into a loop. There we go. So this technique of splitting the thread, if you can do it, if your motor skills and sight will allow it, is beneficial in that it keeps that bulk from adding up with that rachis, because the rachis on these tend to be pretty thick. And then it also allows you to add multiple feathers if you need to use some of that CDC that is maybe less than desirable. So just gonna wrap that up, and that's still probably way heavier than I want it to be, so I'll go in and pick some of that out. I'll just go ahead and put a collar behind that. Yeah, so I mean, that's way heavier than you would probably want it to be. I mean, you just want it to look, kind of like legs, just give it some movement. But that's what I love about CDC is if, it's not quite how you want it, you can just kind of pick it away and make it exactly how you want it without it looking weird, like if you trim marabou or anything like that. So that's just a easy Euro nymph, and an example of how you can use split thread techniques to use it on a collar. Let's see, looking in the comments real quick. James says, save your CDC for trout flies. So that was kind of what I was thinking. It just doesn't seem like it would be real beneficial in saltwater, but I'd be, you never know. Gary Carlson says we use floating flies, which maybe float better even on the salt. So that's true. I guess if you're using floating flies, it certainly wouldn't deter from them. I don't know how beneficial it would be. Neil Harding. If you spin your bobbin holder counterclockwise, the thread flattens and you can run the tip of the bodkin up and down to split the threads. Yes, for sure. You can certainly do that. With this little tool, it just has a little burr on the end, so it makes it a little bit easier, but you can definitely do it that way too. I just find it more difficult to do it that way. The name of the thread splitter, let me grab it real quick. It's in my drawer. Well, I set it aside because I knew I would be asked that, and I can't remember what it is. Let me look on my phone real quick and look at my orders.
I bought one of these little tools for splitting the thread, and I never have been able to make the doggone thing work, but I think it has a lot of problems. A lot of the problems I can't see very well.
Okay, this one is, oh goodness, where did it go?
What thread are you using to do that when you have problems regardless of your eyesight? No, the gentleman that was just speaking,
That was Rick.
Rick.
Usually I'm using a bigger, like a 6 or bigger thread.
What manufacturer? Sorry.
I use a lot of I've been using Semperfly here lately, but oh gosh.
Well, the point is, if you're using uni or any thread that is smaller probably than 14 to 16, like 14, 16, 18 odd, it has a counter wrap and you'll never split it. So you need a flat thread.
Okay. All right. So like a 240 or something like that.
I use Vivas 12.0 on almost everything, but I tie small flies. And
Okay.
it's a flat thread, and it's great.
Yeah, I do a lot of Vivas as well. So, okay. I'll play with that a little bit. I want to learn this technique. And now after watching Brit there, I really want to learn how to do this technique.
I'm looking up that thread splitter. There it is. I found it. It's Daniel Wilmer's thread splitter. It's out of Germany. It's the only place I found stateside that has it is Caster's Fly Shop, which I think is Dave Heiss. And I was playing with it when I first got it a couple weeks ago, and I was able to split down to 18? Yeah, I think it was 18 nano silk, and I was able to split it. So I generally don't need to split size 18 nano silk, but I was able to do it.
The nano splits wonderfully. It's
Yeah.
the only one that'll go that small to split. It's because it's gel spun, right?
It's definitely easier to me to split the nano
Yeah.
gel than it is just like the class, like, you know, your typical wax threads. But yeah, it's called Daniel Wilmer's thread splitter. But yeah, it's another gadget for us to play with. But I mean, it's super simple. It's just a little needle, and I don't think I can get stuff in focus, but there's just a little nub, kind of a little burr on the end of it. But I don't know, seems to work. So even for me, which is pretty amazing. All right, so I think the last fly we're gonna do tonight is, it's just more of your regular nymph, not a Euro nymph, thank goodness.
Brit?
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt you there, but we're getting a little beyond our time that we normally go. Is this a quick tie?
Not particularly. I mean, that's fine. We can just end now if you'd like. That's fine.
Okay, I hate to cut you off, but
I know I how long we go, so I just planned as many as I thought I might need. So
yeah, I understand. Yeah, people are dropping off, so we usually go till 7:30 and call her good. Or
yeah, no, I plan on, I'll probably put a YouTube video up on this one. So
it's been fascinating. I got a lot more appreciation now for CDC, and I think a lot of folks have thrown in some great ideas. And
I mean, it's just, it seems like it's not utilized over here as much, you know, for whatever reason. So
When you start using it a lot and catching fish, you'll realize why we call it trout crack.
Right, exactly.
It is trout crack for sure. I've been tying with it for over 12 years, and it's wonderful stuff. And you did a very good job. You're on a great journey.
yeah,
And that's where, like, at first it was just frustrating because it's just, you know, I just didn't have good material, and so I got frustrated and said to hell with it, and you know, I'll just fish my hair wings and all good. And you know, once I finally got some better material, it definitely made a difference.
To get nerdy about it, what you're noticing with the good material, the feathers, the hairline and spirit, which are junk, come from, I believe they come from the Ozarks. No offense to the Ozarks. That's what I was told by my local fly shop. Swiss CDC and Trout Hunter CDC come from Europe. And the ducks are raised to be foie gras. And they get bigger and they're nourished better. And thus we get much better feathers out of the French ducks. And we enjoy the foie gras.
Once I mean, because kind of, I mean, when you're first thinking, you know, the trout hunter stuff, it's not cheap, but it makes all the difference. That better quality.
Cheaper than Swiss CDC, I think, but you're splitting feathers.
It's definitely a different material to work with, and I mean, the cutthroat seem to like it, so that's all I care about.
Yeah, you led us on a good journey there. I really like how you put it together and took us from the beginnings, and
yes,
it's been well thought out, and you did a really nice job. Really
you know, when
enjoyed it.
Fratnick designed the F fly, what it was for?
What was
It
it?
was, his are small. It's to fish it when the bats come out.
Hmm.
It was all those little flies you can't see at dusk and darker. And he said, when the bats come out, he said it in his own language. When the bats come out, fish the F fly.
Right? I mean,
So you
it's
can fish them in 2022s
oh yeah.
and they'll work.
It almost kind of reminds me of, it's such a simple fly. It almost reminds me of one of our favorite flies, the Tom Thumb, where it's just the most basic fly.
Mm-hmm.
Catches fish, and it just catches fish. I mean, there's nothing to it. And that one, the more fish you catch with it, and the uglier it gets, the better it catches fish.
Yeah.
Yep.
Since you're reading books, remember, write down the name Roberto Messori. He's Italian, Messori.
Okay.
He has 3 or 4 books on CDC, and he is an absolute artist.
Oh, okay.
And his flies are great. And he's got ephemera, he's got terrestrials. It's all broken down into that. And it's stuff that'll just blow your mind, and you'll be able to tie it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that suggestion.
Sure.
You bet.
That's the one thing I love about this is you're always learning. I mean, that's the coolest part of it.
When you have somebody that blabs like me,
There's
just
darn
ask.
rabbit holes that just, ugh, I don't know about those rabbit holes like salmon flies though.
That's what fly tying's all about. It is a journey.
Yeah,
And it never ends.
and that's, I mean, in 12 years, I didn't tie a whole lot to start with, but the last few years, I've started tying a lot more, and it's just there's always something new to learn, and even if it's someone that hasn't been tying as long as you there might be a technique that they know that you don't. So
Yeah, it's been kind of fun watching your progression.
thank you.
It really has been.
Are you tying in the North Atlantic Salmon Fly Tyers Guild?
Yes, so I am a member of the Salmon Fly Guild, which has been just an amazing resource to learn those, having that hands-on. It's about 6 hours one way, so once a month I usually drive over. Halfway I sleep in my car overnight and then go to the and then drive. I haven't made the last couple, so I'm hoping to make this month's, but
I'll tell my friend Chuck to put you up in his house.
or does it Chuck Ballard? Oh goodness.
Yeah, he's a good friend.
It's a great group, and I mean it's a little bit of a drive, but it's really been beneficial, and we're lucky to have them. And they're so willing to teach, which is pretty amazing. I know a lot of years ago that necessarily wasn't the case, where people were kind of more tight-lipped on things, and so that they're so willing to share their experiences and techniques and just help people out that are learning is just been phenomenal. So I'm lucky it's only
Rick, you're right. It is a journey. I've been tying since 75, but I've only really been tying for the last 4 years or 3 years. And the more of these I watch, the more I get involved and the more excited I become about fly tying. And at 78 years old, it's kind of fun to get excited about something again. So
Amen. Absolutely. I gave up all my commercial fly tying and stuff because of the corporate world, and that was back in the early 80s, and then I retired and sat around and did nothing for a year, and then all of a sudden I said, I'm going back, and I'll tell you what, I've learned more in the last 11 years than I ever learned in the first 10 years, without a doubt.
yeah, you and Al Beatty and a few others have taught me more in the last 2 years than I could have learned if I'd gone to college for the last 2 years. It's amazing. And I thank you guys for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. With that, I'm going to send us off here in a minute, but I just wanted to let you know we have one more of these sessions left. It's next Tuesday, the 30th of April. Our tyer will be Gunnar Brammer. He will be dealing with bucktail techniques and that sort of thing. He's a young fella. He has quite a presence on YouTube, and I enjoy watching his videos. what he does with Bucktail is fascinating to me, and the flies that he comes up with are unbelievable. But he's kind of a student of Bob Popovich's and Blaine Chocolates, and he does some amazing things. And I finally figured out that I could take those massive, big, musky things that he's building and put them in a small size, and by golly, they do work for a trout once in a while. So for our last one, I'd like to invite everybody. I hope you can attend, and I've really appreciated your attention and your enthusiasm for this particular class thing that we're doing here. So I've enjoyed it immensely. I've enjoyed all of you immensely as well.
Britt, do you have a way to get in touch with you? I'll send you a picture of a Petitjean fly. I've got one framed.
Oh, you do? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, unless it's not over the top to show it now, Rick. I'll pull it off the wall.
Go ahead, real quick.
Can you spotlight me?
I sure can. There we go.
Tell me when it's in focus.
Focus, but it's got a little reflection on it. But
That's because the light's from overhead.
yeah,
I'm sorry. I thought it'd show up better.
no.
It's a done, and he's done it with one CDC feather.
Gosh.
See that?
So the tails are Coq de Leon, the body is CDC, like Britt was doing, and then he used the magic tool to do the wing, and you just keep pulling it back as you wrap forward with your brush, and then you tie off the head, and then what you do is you preen everything up, and what's left hanging down, you cut it along the bottom.
Oh my goodness.
There, what? Right there.
Wow.
I mean, his touch is so light, it just blows my mind.
That's amazing.
Such a master with it.
Absolutely beautiful.
Pays to do something for 30 plus years, doesn't it?
Thank you for that, Neil. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome, Rick. My pleasure. I didn't want to
Yeah,
take
thank
any thunder away or be, look at this. But a friend in my club in Los Angeles died a few years ago, and his wife was selling everything. And my brother walked in and he said, "I'm going to make this a birthday present for Neil." So, and it's because he knows I'm just a Petitjean freak.
That's cool. That is.
Yeah.
So anything else? Any wrap up on your part, Bree, or Brett? Sorry.
just thank everybody for coming. It's pretty basic techniques. So like I said, I don't know everything about it, but it's fun to use. So yeah, if you haven't tried it, give it a go. That kind of goes with the get out of your comfort zone theme.
Thank you, Britt. You taught me an awful lot tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you did well. Absolutely.
Trying something different and getting out of your comfort zones.
All
Keep
right.
giving it away like you're doing. Just keep giving it away. It's great. You'll love it.
Yeah, figure out something for our next season.
Shit.
I'm looking for presenters already. So if anybody's interested, let me know. With that, I'm going to wish everybody a good evening and a great rest of your week, and tight lines. Let's go catch
Thanks,
them.
Britt, for hosting.
Thanks.
High
Britt,
lines.
quick question. The dubbing that you're using, did you buy that or is that one you loaded?
So it's one you can buy them, I think, preloaded, or
Okay.
you buy them empty and you can load them yourself. Like we have some empty ones that we just use our own dubbing in.
Well, that's what I was wondering. What you're using, is that your own or did you buy that?
Yeah, no, this is the Semperfli dubbing.
Okay, thank you.
I have the empty containers to put your own in too.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
See you, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent
Brett.
presentation.
Thank you, Vaughn.